Since 1911, just after Federation, our boys in blue have pulled us through some times of tribulation. In 2 great wars and other altercations, our boys in blue have paid their dues through every generation. For 75 years of naval service to the nation, our boys in blue have earned from you a birthday salutation.
They converged from 6 parts of the globe for the party. They came from Britain and Canada and the United States and were joined by France, Papua New Guinea and New Zealand. The Royal Australian Navy proudly brought its mates home, 8,000 of them, in fact.
Purpose, a celebration, to give us a chance to, as it says behind us, ask some mates to a party and to allow the people of Australia to share in what we had to offer. And of course, to show ourselves, to push what we believe, that our task is the preservation of peace. That's what the Australian Defence Force is for. And what the Navy is particularly well suited for is display, presence, showing power in a friendly way.
It was a grey day for such a grand entry, with the air abuzz with pilots, both military and civilian. Some staidly greeted the visitors. Others just revelled in the aerobatic power of their flying machines. The most heavily escorted were the American vessels. Over the past weeks, protesters had launched a growing campaign against the possible presence of nuclear weapons in Sydney Harbour, and had signalled that they were going to turn their words into waterborne action. For their part, the police and those who just wanted to welcome the Americans were equally determined that there would be no halt in the fleet entry. And in a colourful variety of small craft, both sides took to the water.
On 2 occasions, 3 members of one of the peace groups came to our office to talk to us, and we discussed at great length what we both sides, if you like, wanted to achieve. We explained very clearly what the difficulties and dangers would be. We left with a much clearer understanding of what might happen. As a result of this, I believe, the control by this particular group we were talking to was very firm and effective, and there was no dangerous activity except for that one person who had this strange desire to hold onto the bow of a visiting ship.
At Mrs. Macquarie's chair, the best vantage point opposite the berthing area, protesters and greeters were firmly intermixed. And the anti-nuclear lobby didn't entirely have its own way.
As you know, the Missouri will be carrying 32 Tomahawk missiles, the Tomahawk missiles which aren't even a part of any arms agreement that's undertaken between the Soviet Union and the United States. And of course, the Missouri, we can state without any fear of contradiction by anybody, will be a nuclear target for that period of time when it's actually in the Australian waters.
Hey, we get equal time.
Equal time for what?
For peace. We don't want your sort of peace. We want the peace of allies who have helped us for many, many years. And you want to shut them out. Anyone's going to help us is these people. We can't do it on our own.
HMS Illustrious swept in as the jewel of the British task group. With a full carrier air group and an admiral's staff embarked, the ship's complement was about 1,100 officers and ratings, all determined to have some fun in the sun. They'd just finished an intensive exercise with their host country's ships on the way from Brisbane. Now it was definitely time for R&R. The hospitality lines ran hot as Sydney responded with its customary warmth. The wharfside sheds at Woolloomooloo that had seen Australian sailors embark for 2 world wars were now turned into a giant one-stop information shop. Whether it was a sailor looking for a date or a ship's captain looking for 1,200 breakfasts, it was all organised from here.
It's the best black book you've ever seen. About 2,000 names, addresses, telephone numbers, all unattached females, but not all of them single, but all of them, I suppose, looking for a bit of fun.
Below the information centre was the huge naval bazaar, where, apart from learning the local lingo, there were constant reminders of what the celebrations were all about. And there were, of course, souvenirs, information, magazines, and just general window shopping before emerging into Sydney itself.
We commenced, as we always do, it's a standard thing with the dial a sailor, which has proved very popular over the last 10 years, and we commenced that a week before the ships arrived. In fact, that was so extraordinarily popular that 3 days after the ships arrived, I think, from memory, we had just on over 5,000 extra young ladies and families that wanted to invite a sailor home to dinner or take a sailor out to a dance, and we had to regrettably virtually cancel the dial a sailor facility.
I'm having a fantastic time. We've been at sea for so long. Coming to a port like this reminds me so much of home. I love it. It's just fantastic.
That's my first time here. I'm from Montreal, and I really enjoy it.
I went for a meal earlier on, and so it was just having a good time, I think.
It's legit. It's okay. It's pretty nice. People are friendly.
The atmosphere, the people, just the way, the way everybody treats us there. It's incredible.
They're just like American girls, but just a little bit better because it's Australia.
Hi, how you doing? Having a good time here in Australia.
We didn't ask for the Missouri. The United States Navy decided to send her as their leading emissary for this party. She's big, she's a novelty for Australia. We've not had a battleship here since World War II, but of course she is the ship in which the surrender was signed at the end of World War II, and we are trying to talk about the preservation of peace. There's no greater symbol of peace, if you like, than that ship.
Missouri has a total of 9 16-inch guns. If we fire a full broadside, all 9 guns at once, we can put about 18,000 pounds or 9 tons of ordnance in the air. Depends on the type of shell we use. Could be as high as about 19,000 pounds.
Stand by for a demonstration of the 5-inch 38 gun mount's rapid fire capabilities on the starboard side. Battleship represents a unique array of weapon systems with which to project naval power. The development of the advanced cruise missile made the renaissance of the battleship as the centerpiece of a battle group a viable concept in today's environment. The battleship broadside will be fired to starboard. Each of the 9 16-inch 50 guns will be fired along with all 6 guns of the starboard secondary battery. 9, 8, 7, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1.
58,000-ton dreadnought came to anchor and was immediately the prime focus of attention. Her highly decorated commander and his fellow captains almost immediately had to play host to hundreds of retired Australian Navy veterans, all eager to tread the historic decks and swap their own stories of life at sea. And of course, everyone wanted a close look at those 16-inch guns.
At the end of the war, in 1945, President Truman recalled the entire fleet back to the United States. And this ship came into New York Harbor. And I was 5 years old, standing on the running board of my dad's car. And I looked down on this ship, firing out a 21-gun salute for President Truman as he came aboard. And I said, when I grow up, I'm going to be a sailor on the Big Mo.
The question was, is there a real sense of history in commanding this ship? There certainly is. As most of you probably know, this ship fought in World War II. It saw action in 1945 in the Iwo Jima and the Okinawa campaigns. Of course, the surrender ending the Second World War was signed on this deck that you're standing on right now and right behind the photographers over here. If you haven't seen that plaque embedded in the deck, then it's worth taking a look at. But that's the spot where the surrender was signed. And it's really terrific to have command of a ship with that kind of history.
September 1st, 1945, on the Battleship Missouri.
It is my earnest hope, and indeed the hope of all mankind, that from this solemn occasion, a better world shall emerge out of the blood and carnage of the past. A world founded upon faith and understanding. A world dedicated to the dignity of man and the fulfillment of his most cherished wish for freedom, tolerance, and justice. I now invite the representatives of the Emperor of Japan and the Japanese government and the Japanese Imperial General Headquarters to sign the instrument of surrender at the places indicated. Let us pray that peace be now restored to the world and that God will preserve it always. These proceedings are closed.
It was to be one of the largest parades the city of Sydney had ever seen. 2,500 men and bands from 7 nations were to take part. It was a day for glitter and ceremony, and proud girlfriends and families. The crowds had gathered in the sunshine all along the route. They packed the town hall where the Governor-General was to take the salute. With him, to honour the white ensign, were an array of admirals and civilian dignitaries. The Navy and the city joined hands in welcome.
I think the crowd have really caught on to this week. The City of Sydney are welcoming us, and they're as excited as we are about it all.
Resplendent from the British contingent were the Royal Marines, with leopard skin and scarlet stripe symbolic of centuries of battle at sea. And ever in friendly competition, the American sailors had brought with them the famed US Marine Corps band. The end of the parade was barely turning the corner from one end of the route when the head passed the saluting area. And the French matelots, of course, marched to a different drum.
We asked those who are the daughters, if you like, of the Royal Navy and the United States, and also we asked France, largely because of the deep association between many Australian families and France because of our experience together in World War I.
It was time for the ships to move into position for the review. The first recorded royal review was staged in 1415 for King Henry V as he sailed to battle with France. The last one in Sydney Harbour was a quarter of a century ago. Now, 42 warships, the largest peacetime armada ever to gather in Sydney Harbour, were manoeuvring for a great event. HMS Illustrious launched its full complement of helicopters and Sea Harriers. They would overnight elsewhere and make their debut at the flypast on the day itself.
Well, the point of the concert is we considered we were trying to endeavour to have something different every day right through it to keep the review and assembly and the people of Sydney entertained. That was the prime idea of the concert, and of course we wanted to let the citizens be delighted by the mass bands of the Royal Australian Navy.
The Navy's chief guest, His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, arrived that afternoon. As Admiral of the Fleet, his arrival most fittingly marked the musical salute given by the combined bands of the Royal Australian Navy at an evening concert.
For the Royal Australian Navy, 1986 has been a time for reflection, thanksgiving, dedication, celebration, and very hard work. We have been striving to promote the Navy and to explain the importance of sea power for preserving peace and protecting Australia. In this task, none of us has worked harder than our naval bands.
The day dawned as Sydney's best, sunny and sparkling on the water.
Well, the purpose of a review, either at sea or ashore for that matter, has always been to get together all of the troops or the ships departing on a great campaign or returning from a great campaign. It used to happen in the Crusades in the Middle Ages. It's happening now more for ceremonial reasons. So for all important occasions over the years, we've seen a review of this type. Sydney is the best place in the world to have such a review, of course, because the vantage points for the public are so perfect. They can be very close and really take a part in it, feel it and smell it and see it.
The flag line for the review was led by HMS Perth. The Royal Navy's Beaver, Southland from New Zealand, and then Yukon from the Canadian Destroyer Squadron followed. The American Paul F. Foster was next. 500 yards behind came the French frigate Commandant Blaison. And at the rear of the international array was the Papua New Guinean patrol boat Aitape. Protest there was as well, but in a muted form, and both protesters and the police ensured that the celebrations were unmarred.
Exceeded my expectations in terms of the numbers of people who came to the headlands and came to the harbour. I was a bit worried about all the safety aspects of it, of course, just from bad driving, apart from anything else, overexcitement. But the crowd was splendidly disciplined and very, very well behaved indeed. And I must pay a tribute here to the police force of New South Wales, who showed their professionalism. They behaved most brilliantly throughout the whole week.
Now it was the Sydney-siders' turn to be given the freedom of the harbour and take a close look at those big ships.
You know, Sydney Harbour is such a tremendous spot for a fireworks display. You've got the Opera House and the bridge, and it was sort of a design display. That's what we were trying to do. We were trying to, you know, for the future, design more for the actual site than just going and throwing things up in the air.
And so the crowd stayed on the foreshore, waiting for the best display Sydney had ever seen. And at dusk, all the boats that the city possessed quietly took up positions near the Opera House. There was barely room to manoeuvre, and the setting was perfect. They were promised a display rather like a naval battle, with 1,700 separate shells being fired from 6 barges. Shipboard parties were well underway. The climax was to be a firework that was to envelop Sydney's famed harbour bridge. The Duke of Edinburgh arrived on the Royal Australian Navy flagship Stalwart to watch the show. For 2 days, the ships were open to the public, and the Sydney sunlight brought them from near and far. American, Australian and British ships were at their berths at the Woolloomooloo piers, while a growing crowd waited patiently for hours for the gangplank aboard the mighty Mo to be opened. All of Sydney, it seemed, wanted to see USS Missouri.
With hindsight, there's lots of things I wish we had done, but we didn't, and we planned very carefully for a crowd of about 150,000. You may have heard me explain, we looked at a Melbourne cricket ground and a Sydney cricket ground grand final, added about 10% and thought we couldn't expect any more than that. And an extra 100,000 came, and at least 100,000 were turned away, and I feel very sorry for them. I've apologised. I keep apologising.
At Woolloomooloo, the queues bunched up 10 deep as thousands lined up behind them. Those who waited outside had time for a drink.
About 10:30, that's when they start just all rocking in, you see, and that's all they call it rockers, it's packed out.
The sailors fled their ships and crowded the most popular spot in town, the pub where virtually everyone had a beer.
And everyone seems particularly interested in the money I've made, but they forget there's a lot of quiet weeks that come along in the rest of the year.
Aboard HMS Illustrious, they were seeing the crowds pass through at 3,000 an hour, looking at the sister ship of the aircraft carrier that had fought in the Falklands campaign. Many of those on board had flown the Harriers on those missions, and the questioning of these men about their aircraft was ceaseless.
How? Where does the thrust come from?
Well, you see the two little nozzles on the side,
yeah,
right? They're controlled by the pilot inside with a lever.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to take off vertically, instead of the jet going backwards, you just drop it down to vertical, full power, and up she goes. If you've got the weight right.
By now, concern was mounting as rapidly as the crowds just kept coming in. There was simply no way in which everyone was going to get aboard. Many fainted in the crush, some were injured, and finally, 2 hours before the end of inspection time, the ships and the gates were shut to the queues. The ships could barely cope with the backlog that they had, and 100,000 people were turned away.
It was a great air show, a splendid mixture of the Navy and the Royal Australian Air Force and various civilian concerns. Good show by the historic flight from the Fleet Air Museum, and excellent displays. Wonderful group of people, very well behaved, and a faultless, slick performance, very professional.
No wonder this is a polished display, because the pilot Jeff Trappett spent several seasons in the roulettes.
The air show was at the Navy's air station, south of Sydney.
Spent about 18 months flying F-27, Fokker 27.
They came to HMS Albatross to see the finest collection of historic military aircraft in Australia. It was to be a parade of wings that would trace the history of military aircraft from Tiger Moth to modern jet fighters.
hope the message of it all was that sea power is important and that displaying naval ships has impact and is impressive. It's constructive. It's reassuring. I hope the message is that all of these countries who came here to be with us work together and are proud to be together. I was thrilled by the numbers of people from visiting ships who came up to me and congratulated the Australian Navy on what the Australian Navy was doing. And I'm sure this helped the people of Australia to realise what the Australian Navy can do. And we're just a part of the Australian Defence Force. It was a great effort, I believe, a great display of ceremonial dignity, tremendous fun and spectacle, something that people could watch and also share in and really enjoy. It was lovely to hear the cheers on the harbour during the fireworks and during the review. Lovely to see the people on the headlands and all the small craft out there. It was a birthday party, but not just fun.
Equally, there's a lot of broken-hearted young men on those ships because it's a two-way street. I'm sure the girls had a wonderful time, but I'm just as sure some of the young men had a wonderful time, and one tends to say that there's broken-hearted young ladies, but this day and age, there's a lot of broken-hearted young sailors who won't sleep very much tonight. City of Sydney had a wonderful birthday celebration on behalf of the Royal Australian Navy. We involved the ships and the sailors and the city, and it was just quite extraordinary. I mean, the response of the visiting sailors was so great, and let's not forget that the average age of these sailors is 19 years of age. And of course, they're going to take home in their memory banks a wonderful, splendid spectaculars and fireworks and all the various other things and the people they met. But they will come back to this country in the next 20, 30, 40 years with their wives and families and children, and they'll come back because of the fond memories that the citizens of Sydney gave them.